So this video is part 2 of my discussion of Janie's narrative, specifically focusing on the driveway. I will add the link for part 1 in the description section for this video if you haven't seen it. But I'll give you a quick recap because this second video is going to tie everything in together. So one of the things that I pointed out in the first video is the intertwined timelines. When you look at her talking about Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, there are a lot of things that she says, a lot of statements, that you could basically swap around. Her description of hearing the kids and her dog barking is the same for Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, as in pretty much the same wording. And then you have this thing with the one location. Every single thing that occurs in one location on the driveway. She was raking gravel. That's where Malaya was standing. That's where the boot prints were found. But the other thing in terms of the intertwined timelines is that she's not retelling it in a linear fashion. She's telling it in a location-based manner. So when she starts talking about Malaya standing out on the driveway with Meadow, you could be mistaken for thinking she's talking about Thursday afternoon because sequentially it comes after, pretty much all the time, it is connected with her talking about the kids playing with worms on the Thursday afternoon. All this stuff that occurs on the driveway or the stuff that occurs with the children on Thursday and Friday afternoon, she's not telling it sequentially. It's just all jumbled in together. If someone is describing events to you that actually occurred, they're being truthful, then they are going to describe them in a sequential manner. Not only that, the way they describe them is going to change a little bit every time. It's not going to be pretty much the same wording every time. And yet, that's what Janie does. It's got to the point where we couldn't recite her narrative because of all the ways she's said the same thing over and over. We have her repeated claims that had they got out of the yard and onto the driveway, she would have heard them because of Lily with her, "Come on, Jack, let's go, Jack." And at the same time she says they wouldn't have wandered off into the woods. She knows that for certain because Jack doesn't even like going into the woods. He has to be carried. They only ever go into the woods when they go there with her grandchildren. But then she turns around and claims that the first thing that she did when Malaya told her the children were missing was to head off into the woods. Now, I love reading comments from my videos because something that somebody pointed out, which I thought was really good, and I had actually missed it, although it may be that it was not from the CBC interview, but when she's talking about I immediately thought they went off into the woods, she doesn't actually say that. She says that Malaya told her the children were missing and she basically went, and you would immediately think they went into the woods, meaning that's not what she immediately thought. She's saying that's what a random person would think, that's not what she actually thought. And yet she still headed off into the woods. I speculated in yesterday's video that perhaps her heading off into the woods was more about avoiding the Mounties, wanting to be absent when they arrived. Because you also hear her talking about when she gets back, she just basically goes straight into her RV, even though she can see that the Mounties are there, and she obviously didn't go over and speak to them and say, well, I've just been looking up here, what you would naturally do. The other thing I pointed out in yesterday's video was Malaya's very, very minimal role in Janie's narrative. This is the mother of the children, but the only role she has in this entire narrative is that she is just randomly standing out on the driveway with Meadow when Janie walks out of her RV, and she tells Janie that the children are missing. That's all. We don't have anything in the lead up or in the follow up to that. So what do I mean by that? Well, Janie walks out in the driveway, Malaya's just standing on the driveway. She doesn't say that she's doing anything, she's just standing there holding Meadow, which in itself is really, really odd. But you would expect to hear something along the lines of, she was on the driveway holding Meadow on the phone because that's the only spot in the drive on the property where you can get phone reception, something like that. Or she was on the driveway holding Meadow, and she said she was just coming to see if I was in. But none of that. Apparently Malaya is just randomly standing there, totally stock still in the driveway when Janie comes out. I mean, really? In terms of narratives, there should be some sort of action here for Malaya. What exactly was she doing other than just standing on the driveway? There's no description of her emotions. There's no description of her doing anything other than just standing there, which makes me think it's a non-event. This is something that Janie has inserted for being told the children have gone missing. Or maybe it occurred at a different time, and what she is portraying here is maybe Malaya standing on the driveway in shock over something. I don't know. But the other thing is that after Malaya tells her the children are missing, Malaya doesn't actually do anything after that. Janie goes and puts her boots on and goes searching off in the woods. But we have no idea after that what happens with Malaya. She's a herald, basically. All she does is stand in the driveway, say the children are missing. That's her role done. That's her little bit part. Exit, stage left. The difference being, Janie talks about when she gets up to the road up the back of the property, she runs into Daniel and he's there on the four-wheeler, and I think she said he was on the four-wheeler. I'm not sure she actually said. But he's like, well, I'm going to go search some more. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, no, I'm going to search around here. And she's like, so he kept going and I went back down. So Daniel has action before he starts talking to Janie and after he starts talking to Janie. It's a continuous thing, unlike Malaya, who's just randomly standing in the driveway and then that's it. So I find that really, really odd. I find it really disconcerting, and I think that either it didn't happen or that's really not what was going on in terms of Malaya standing out on the driveway with Meadow. Now, the reason why investigators interview people so many times when they are looking at cases is that they are basically trying to trip them up, find inconsistencies in their stories, find the things that don't match. And to be perfectly honest, I think had the RCMP interviewed Janie multiple times, then she would have been an absolute treasure trove. The big standout, which I pointed out yesterday, is when she's talking about the children going missing. The official narrative that we've heard is that her brother rang her, then she went for a nap, I think it was, then her dog started barking, she heard the children outside, and then she dozed off again, and she woke up because Daniel was calling out for the kids, and then about 10 minutes later she went outside and saw Malaya. But with all this Facebook stuff, she's told that story so many times that you start to see a shift in the way she tells it. And what we get in two separate recounts, meaning that it wasn't a slip up, it wasn't a mistake, it sounds like the real deal. She talks about hearing the children outside. She doesn't go outside. And then all of a sudden, everything goes completely quiet. It wasn't that she dozed off and then woke up and realised she couldn't hear the children, like what Malaya and Daniel say, which is basically her narrative as well, in terms of she'd heard them playing and she woke up to Daniel calling out. No. It changes to basically she hears the children playing and then suddenly everything is completely silent. And then the next thing she hears Daniel yelling. All of these things are consecutive. They are not broken up by her suddenly napping and waking up to these things. Meaning that the actual timeline here that is being suggested is that the children were outside, they were being noisy as usual, and something suddenly happened to those children. And whatever suddenly happened, Daniel immediately responded to by yelling. I believe that this is actual leakage here, and that she is telling us what occurred. Something occurred on the property that was sudden. Something clearly disastrous, because it went from the children making noise, being really loud, to all of a sudden it was completely quiet and then Daniel was yelling. That certainly points more towards there being some sort of accident occurring on the property, as opposed to those children wandering off into the woods, or this story of them being taken away in a car by someone, which I call utter BS on, and I will cover that more in another video. Now, before I jump in and talk about the final clips that I have to share with you, I'm just going to do a quick recap of some of the clips from the interview that Janie did with CBC, because these are fairly significant, and this, of course, is the official narrative that we were given.
Okay, I went and I laid down. Next thing you know, my dog started barking, and the kids were out in the yard. If two kids get out of a fence, and Jack and Lily are all the time yelling, especially Lily, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, let's go, Jackie. It's all I hear out here. When the kids get out of the fence and come out through here, I would have heard them yelling, come on, Jackie, let's go, let's go. I didn't hear anything.
So they were two of the key points that we got from the CBC interview. This whole thing of, if the kids went out, I didn't hear anything, you know. If they went out through that gate, I should have heard something. So they couldn't have gone through that gate. And my dog started barking and I heard the kids. So now that I've just gone through the things that I covered from yesterday, now that I've gone through a few of the really important things from CBC, let's jump in and listen to some more of this audio from Janie.
As the dog barked when he heard them outside, and then it went completely silent, and my dog never said a word after, or never barked after that until he heard Daniel yelling for Lily and Jack.
Okay, that was a mic drop moment for me. She says the dog barked when he heard them outside, and then it went completely silent, and my dog never said a word after, and then she corrects herself and says, never barked, and goes on to say, after that until he heard Daniel yelling for Jack and Lily. Now, never is one of those absolutes. Never, ever. Like there's 0% chance of it ever happening again because it never, ever happens. That's huge on its own. But what she said was, my dog never said a word after, and then she caught herself. She's talking about Lily and Jack being outside playing, and suddenly everything goes utterly silent. And let's just take the "and my dog" part out of that, or my dog at least, and never said a word after. The dog barked when he heard the kids, and then it went completely silent and never said a word after. Who never said a word after? This is not the sort of slip-up that is just a random slip-up. This is a classic example of leakage. She has just told us here that the kids were outside playing. Her dog reacted and it went completely silent, and the kids never said a word after that. Dogs don't speak. Dogs can't say words. She was talking about the children at that point. She is talking about the moment something happened to those children. That complete silence. And they never said a word after that. And she can't get beyond that, because then when she does correct herself and talks about the dog barking, she can't drop the word never. Her brain is still stuck on whatever happened to the children. So she says he never barked. And then she says sorry, and she says never barked after that until he heard Daniel yelling for Lily and Jack. So she's tried to correct herself from the slip-up with the never said a word after. But instead, she's still stuck on the never. We know that her dog did bark after that. So saying her dog never barked is incorrect. But it's because her brain is still focused on whatever happened to Jack and Lily. That complete silence followed them by them never saying a word after that. I really hope that the Mounties have listened to Janie's audio from Facebook, and I really think they should be interviewing her again.
And to tell you the truth, if I was a child that was in a fence and got out of it and was running, yes, I would be excited to go. And those kids are always excited when they're running around because they're always screaming and hollering. Believe me, I know. I observed it for 2 years out back here.
Now, when someone breaks from the narrative and introduces something else that is offered a bit of a tangent, you need to pay attention. Especially when they're basically offering it up. So, completely breaking away from the narrative, she says, if I was a child that was in a fence and got out of it and was running, yes, I would be excited to go. And then she says, and those kids are always excited when they're running around because they're always screaming and hollering. So she's suddenly introduced the concept of children getting out of a fenced yard and running excitedly. And she even then focuses in on Jack and Lily. They're always excited when they're running around. Now, yes, I'm sure she was trying to explain well, if they'd got out of the yard, I would have heard them because Lily would be saying, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie," which is very specific. But now she's talking about it in terms of the children getting out of the yard and running with excitement because they were out of the yard. She's introduced this suddenly to this whole notion of, oh, I would have heard them. This is an unnecessary detail to be adding if you are simply saying, if the kids had got out of the yard, I would have heard them. She's basically just added something very, very specific to a hypothetical situation. And that's concerning to me, especially because it's been excluded in the past from her explanation of, well, if they got out of the yard, I would have heard them. Now I can actually picture Lily and Jack getting out of that yard and running because they're excited. To me, it sounds like leakage. It sounds like she is describing an actual event.
If the kids were out in the yard by themselves, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and were running up the driveway, I would know, or I would think the kids would be saying, especially Lily, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie," because that's all she ever did was say that. Even up in the woods with my other two grandchildren, if Jack is sitting there looking for bugs, Lily's usually saying, come on, Jackie, let's go.
So she's once again introduced the notion of the kids potentially getting out of the yard. And this time she's added more to it. If the kids were out in the yard by themselves, unattended, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and were running. Now, okay, first of all, if the kids were out in the yard by themselves. Well, she goes on and on about Malaya not supervising the kids, Malaya not paying attention to the kids when they're outside, and how it's up to her to keep an eye on them, and she's the one that always watches them. And now she's introducing, well, if they're out there by themselves, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and we're running. And what she has done is she's gone from speaking hypothetically to speaking in the past tense. She's talking hypothetically if they get out of the gate, and then switches to and were running. So midway through her sentence, she's gone from describing a hypothetical situation to retelling an event. She starts off using present active tense, meaning if they were doing it right this very minute, they get out of the gate. This is present tense active language. They are doing it this very moment. And then she straight away switches to the past tense. They were running. This hypothetical situation that she's presenting here, to me, sounds like it is far more than just a hypothetical situation.
So that's another thing I can't understand is if I never heard the kids running. If the kids were running out of the yard, out of the gate, out of the fence, my dog would have still been barking. As I said, because of Lily's loud scream and hollering. So, as I said, I heard the kids out here in the yard by the swings. And then I heard completely silence. So you guys can have your opinions, or you guys have your speculations or whatever. But I'm just saying, in my opinion, why didn't I hear the kids longer if they get out of the fence and start running up the driveway or leaving the driveway?
So going back to what I was saying about intertwined narratives, at the start of this video and in yesterday's video. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, when someone is giving you a retelling of a narrative that they've given you before and they introduce something new, then you need to pay attention. And this time round, she introduced at the start of this, I never heard the kids running. That implies that the kids were running, but she never heard them. You could say that she's saying, well, I never heard them running, so they couldn't have been. But the wording of it implies that they were actually running, but she never heard them. And then she switches back to her accepted narrative, that she heard them out by the swings. But now she's sticking with, and I don't think she even realises that she's done it, she sticks with, and then I heard complete silence. This is definitely a change from the original story of she heard them on the swings, she drifted off to sleep, and the next thing she knows, Daniel is calling out for them. Her drifting off to sleep in between all this is completely gone from the narrative. You have consecutively them playing outside on the swings, and then everything goes silent. And then presumably, if that is consecutive, then the Daniel calling out is the next part of this. And she even asks, why didn't I hear the kids longer? So she's essentially saying here, and I don't think she's even realised what she's saying, but she's essentially saying it shouldn't have just gone completely silent like that. I should have heard them still. And then she qualifies that with, if they get out of the fence and start running up the driveway or leaving the driveway. So now she's added to this whole thing of them getting out of the fence. No, it's no longer just, oh, if they got out of the fence, I would have heard them yelling. Now it is them getting out of the fence, running excitedly up the driveway. Not running up into the woods, heading up into the woods, but they're running along the driveway. The or leaving the driveway is an add-on at the end, and I think that is her trying to fit it into the narrative in terms of she's, at this point in time, was starting to try and push the narrative of someone taking them away in a vehicle, because she had basically backed herself into a corner by saying that they weren't in the woods. So the only other option that she could offer people is that someone abducted them. But the big concern here is this discussion of them getting out of the driveway, out onto the driveway, and running up the driveway.
I heard them out in the yard here Thursday afternoon. And when I heard them out, my dog started barking. My dog tells me when the kids are in the yard. Okay? I went out, when they heard them out in the yard, my dog started barking. I opened the door and let my dog out. My dog is penned in. I do not let my dog around Jack and Lily. From what I hear through the grapevine, Jack and Lily have not been around animals.
So now we get this random bit of narrative that is completely different from everything else that she said. She heard them out in the yard on the Thursday, and she let her dog out because her dog was barking. And then she emphasises that she doesn't allow her dog around Jack and Lily because her understanding is that they've not been around animals. We've seen the video of them around Cindy and Wade's dogs. And if you've seen the video that Tint did, it appears that Cindy also has horses. So I find it somewhat unbelievable that these kids would have not been around animals. We know that they've been around dogs. So it is very interesting that she says this. And she's emphasising here that she doesn't let her dog around Jack and Lily. But why introduce this to the narrative about the Thursday afternoon? How does it fit in? In her head, how did she make that connection to, after all the times she's told this narrative, why is she now saying that when she heard them outside, she let the dog out? I'm just going to put a pin in that one and just leave that one there for now.
I am telling my truth about my side of what happened. On May 1st, nobody was here.
Was there any kind of party?
No.
Was there any kind of gathering that someone might have thought was a party?
No.
There were no people at the house?
No. Not the night before.
So it seems that both Janie and Daniel are quite intent on making sure that people know that there was no one there on the 1st of May. That's the Thursday before the children allegedly went missing. You have Janie saying on May the 1st, nobody was here. And then Daniel saying, she says, there were no people at the house. And he says, no, not the night before. Now with Daniel, he's saying that in the context of these allegations at the very beginning that there'd been some sort of big party the night before the children went missing. But he doesn't actually say a full sentence there. Not the night before what? Not the night before the children went missing, not before the night before we reported the children missing, not the night before this happened. And you've got Janie, on May the 1st, nobody was here. Now, yes, that could be, well, it was apparently in the context of who was on the property, or who was at the property when, in terms of Malaya's family and stuff like that. But why start that timeline in terms of who had turned up to help look for the kids the night before? Why not just start with, well, okay, so on May the 2nd, these people arrived at this time. It's information that wasn't required. It's information that she's offered up. Nobody was here on May the 1st. So, is it that someone happened to be there on May the 1st that they don't want people to know about? Or are they genuinely telling the truth here? And I just want to point out the level of vagueness from Daniel and Janie in terms of who was on the property at what time. We have this claim that Janie was supposed to be going out somewhere on the Thursday night with her mystery boyfriend. Now I can't confirm that because I'm not aware of the actual source of that, but that is something that I've heard said. I've also heard people comment in my videos that actually Daniel wasn't there on the night of the Thursday. And of course there's the huge mystery of Justin. We've been told that Justin was going through a divorce. We've been told from Belinda that she was told by Malaya that Justin was living in the RV with Janie. And yet everyone's being so careful, not just to avoid confirming or denying if Justin was living in the caravan, but to even mention Justin. The only reason his name came up was because Belinda brought him up. So my question about the Thursday night is, are they saying that there was nobody there because Justin was there on the Thursday night? Or are they trying to say there was nobody there on the Thursday night because maybe Daniel and or Janie did leave the property at some point on Thursday night? If Janie was meant to go somewhere with her mystery man, was he supposed to pick her up? Would he have been going to the property? Because in one clip she talks about her car not working.
Just right now I'm having a little car problem. So my sister-in-law said that she would take me around to put them up.
And yes, Justin did cry because I was crying. And Justin felt bad for me because I was blaming myself for not getting up and checking on Jack and Lily. That's the reason why Justin was crying, because he was crying because I was crying. And he was also crying because he was upset about Jack and Lily disappearing.
In my opinion, she totally shot herself in the foot there. She's claiming that Justin was crying because she was crying, and she was crying because she blamed herself for not getting up and looking, and then corrects herself to checking on Jack and Lily. There's a lot to unpack here. Now, I think even she realised how ridiculous it sounded to say that Justin was crying because she was crying, because then you heard her change it to, and he was also crying because, and then she had to stop and think about it, that wasn't someone who was struggling with emotion and struggling to get the words out. That was someone trying to think of why he might have been crying. And then she's like, because he was upset about Jack and Lily. So I think, immediately when she said that he was crying because she was crying, she suddenly realised, as she said it, how stupid it sounded. Because, seriously, what guy is going to cry just because his mum is crying? Not likely, especially not in what is essentially a crisis situation. Because in a crisis situation like that, if you get one person that gets all emotional, you tend to get the other people around them go into fix-it mode. So from listening to this statement, I find it highly unlikely that Justin was either crying because she was crying or crying because Jack and Lily had gone missing. This was still within the first couple of days. I believe this could have even been on the first day. I would have to re-listen to Belinda's audio. But this was really early on that Justin was crying. Like I said, they should have all been in crisis management phase at this point in time, not blubbering wrecks. So my first question is, exactly why was Justin crying? Now the other thing is, why did she need to change the wording there when she said, I was blaming myself for not getting up and looking, checking on Jack and Lily? Now, I've said from the get-go that in terms of her being all emotional at that particular point in time, based on what was happening at the time, the fact that she was putting her foot down and saying no to the officer who wanted to check in her RV, and the officer was saying, well, then if you're going to obstruct, I can get you hauled off the property. And that's when she was being emotional. So I've said that from the get-go that when Belinda saw her crying, that it was because of this whole tension over her not wanting them in her RV. And I completely disregarded this whole thing of her blaming herself. Because, well, for starters, we know Janie just didn't like those children. But also, to me, it makes more sense that, in fact, she would be blaming Malaya, because she has said so many times that Malaya is a bad parent. Malaya never watched the kids. Malaya never did anything with the kids. She claims that it was always up to her to keep an eye on the kids when they were outside. Now that is something I'm going to address in another video, because I believe that in actual fact she tended to only pay attention to those kids when they were playing outside if they were playing with her actual grandchildren. Based on the audio, that is what I believe. So I believe that for her, if Jack and Lily were outside without her grandchildren, then she was just in the RV, annoyed at their noise, basically, not really paying any attention to them. Which of course then goes back to the question of, why would she say she blamed herself for not getting up or not looking and checking with Lily and Jack, and saying, if I'd have done that, this never would have happened. So I'm going to put a pin in that one also and come back to it. However, I am going to backtrack and replay one of the pieces of audio that I played earlier in this video. Now, if you watched yesterday's video, I pointed out there was this one instance when you could hear in the background while Janie was talking, her dog was whining. And at the time, she was talking about the Thursday afternoon or evening, whichever you would like it to be. And she was specifically talking about the raking the driveway. And while she was doing that, her dog was whining. Now, that was in yesterday's video. And I said in yesterday's video, I've only heard 2 spots where her dog is whining in the background while she's talking. Now, you may have picked it earlier in the video, but I'm just going to play that clip for you from this video again.
If the kids were out in the yard by themselves, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and were running up the driveway, I would know, or I would think the kids would be saying, especially Lily, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, because that's all she ever did was say that. Even up in the woods with my other 2 grandchildren, if Jack is sitting there looking for bugs, Lily's usually saying, come on, Jackie, let's go.
Okay, so the 2 instances where we are hearing her dog in the background are, one, when she's talking about being out raking the yard. And of course, we know that part of the narrative really well now, because while she was out raking the yard, or when she went to go out to rake the yard for starters, Lily and Jack were apparently together digging for worms, hunting for centipedes. And then she said, good boy, Jack, and she went out to rake the driveway. That's the first time we hear it, and that's in the first video that I've done. In this one, she is talking about if these 2 kids got out onto the driveway, you would hear, come on, Jack, let's go, Jack. And she goes to, even if they're up in the woods and Jack is sitting there looking for bugs, you'd hear her going, come on, Jack, let's go, Jack. So, you know how I said at the start of this video and in the previous video that there seem to be instances where the timelines intertwine or the narrative intertwines. We've got it again. These 2 instances. First of all, you've got her raking the driveway while the kids are digging for bugs. The second one, you've got the possibility of the kids getting out on the driveway, but you should hear Lily going, let's go, Jack, let's go. And then she returns to the digging for worms again. And while she's making both these statements, her dog is whining in the background. And these are the only 2 instances that I have picked so far in all that audio where you hear her dog whining in the background. It's like having her own personal polygraph test in her RV. Because, of course, as you know, dogs are ultra sensitive to emotions, especially to their owner's emotions. So the fact that her dog is whining while she's saying this, suggests to me that he's picking up on some level of stress from her. Now I'm going to once again put a pin in that one and come back to it. But I do think it's significant, and it did fit in with what I was saying before.
And there's another thing that I would like to put out there. I would like whoever has the kids or whoever knows where the kids are, please, if they want to and they want to get out of trouble, please drop them off where they pick them up at night time. We do not have cameras. We do not have an outside street light. It is pure dark. If you watch a video of someone that saw me supposedly filling potholes in, how dark it is, because they drove by to show everybody how dark it is. If they want to drop the kids off of here, and if they got the kids to yell, my dog would let me know that they're out there. I will go get them, and I will make sure they are safe.
This is such an oddly specific statement. She's like, whoever's got them. Not, can you just please return them safely? Or, drop them off at the RCMP. Or drop them off at a church somewhere. Or even just, please just bring them back and we won't say anything. But no, she's really specific about it. Bring them back at night time. She says it's pure dark here. There's no street lights. And then she goes on to say, basically, once the kids yell, the dog will let me know they're there, and I'll go get them and make sure they are safe. Now, I was originally going to play that clip just for the mention of the fact that it is pure dark there at night time. But then I re-listened to it, and it got me thinking about what she was saying here. Because the way she says it, when she starts saying, please drop them off where they picked them up, and then she tacks on at night time. And the way it runs, you could almost think that, she's saying, drop them off at the place where they pick them up at night time, as opposed to drop them off at night time in the same location where you picked them up the first time. And I know she's making the point here of, it's dark, we wouldn't be able to see who you were, yada yada. But it does sound odd, and it was one of those things that really stood out to me. The mention of it being at night time, drop them off at night time, and the mention of it being pure dark. And that was the main thing that I was going to comment on here. But then I thought about the way she says that the kids would yell and the dog would let me know, and then I could go and get them and make sure they're safe. Now, I was saying earlier that I had discounted her comment about blaming herself for the kids going missing, allegedly, because she didn't check on them or she didn't go look. And now she's saying, basically, if her dog barked and she heard the kids, she would go and get them and make sure they're safe. Now, I have no doubt that in her mind, this is the story that she's come up with on the spot to make it sound that she is genuinely believing that someone has taken these children and that she wants them to bring them back. It's the talking the talk, essentially. But I think we are getting some leakage here. Because what is really interesting is that you have her with this whole scenario originally of claiming that she didn't hear the kids when they allegedly went missing, and that she blames herself for not checking on them, because had she checked on them, this wouldn't have happened. And she seems almost definite in terms of, had she just gone out and checked on them, this never would have happened. So now, this story that she's saying in terms of, please bring them back. If you bring them back at night time, I won't see you. My dog will hear the kids though, and he'll bark. He'll tell me they're there. And I'll go out and get them and make sure they're safe. It's a redemption story. She's replaying that original scenario of not going out and checking on the kids, and then something happened apparently, or, you know, saying if I'd have only gone out and checked on them, none of this would have happened. And she's reframing that to redemption. Bring them back, I'll hear them, my dog will tell me they're there, and I will go out. And I will go and get them, and I will make sure they're safe. Suddenly hearing her say this, like I said, this is leakage. This is not her actually thinking it through and trying to say, this is me asking for redemption. This is her mind basically feeding her the words, where she is basically subconsciously wanting redemption for not going out and checking on those kids when whatever happened did so. That's my belief anyway, because it sounds precisely like that. She's basically dialing back the original story of, I blame myself because if I'd have gone out and checked on those kids, this would have never happened. And now it's, I would go out and I would collect those kids and make sure they were safe. So I have one more audio clip for you, and then I want to go back to two photos that I know you've seen, or two screenshots that I know you've seen, but I think they are significant.
Yes, it just went like a flash too. Like the day here was just chaos. Everybody running around panicking. Like what it looked like is like a whole bunch of little ants. Everybody just running around, looking for Jack and Lily.
Okay, so she's referring to the Friday that they allegedly went missing, and talking about all the searchers being there and how busy it was and how everyone was rushing around like ants. But the very first thing she says is that it just went like a flash. But even the went was kind of like swallowed in that. Now, yes, she's talking specifically about the chaos of that day. But again, I'm thinking there's a bit of leakage happening here when she says it went like a flash. So there's one clip that I do want to replay before I show you the two images that I've just referred to. And this clip is, I played it yesterday and I played it again at the beginning of this video. And there's a reason for that. This is the clip from the CBC interview when Janie is basically saying to the reporter that she would have heard them had they gone out that gate and onto the driveway. And I want you to have a look, while she is saying this, of what she is doing in terms of indicating direction with her hands.
If two kids get out of a fence, and Jack and Lily are all the time yelling, especially Lily, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, let's go, Jackie. It's all I hear out here. When the kids get out of the fence and come out through here, I would have heard them yelling, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, let's go." I didn't hear anything.
Now she does, at the end of it, start signalling uphill up into the woods with her hand. But when she first does if they came out here, she's signalling down the driveway, not up into the woods. Now, I thought, and I have all along been saying that basically I was connecting that the whole, if these kids got out of the gate here, I would have heard them. I was connecting that with her saying I was certain they weren't in the woods, or I immediately went and searched in the woods. And you've heard me say so many times, if she's saying that she didn't hear them go out this gateway, why would she then presume that they went in the woods? And it occurs to me that actually, in her mind, the two things are not connected. I actually don't think that she's referring to them getting out onto the driveway to go up into the woods. I think she's referring to them simply getting out onto the driveway. So she's very insistent that had they got through that gate and onto the driveway, she would have heard them. She has said this over and over. And like I said, I thought this was her way of explaining that they weren't in the woods. But when you think about it, her explanation of they're not in the woods comes from basically the fact that they don't like going up in the woods, and they only ever go up there with her older grandchildren, and if Jack goes up in the woods, he's got to be carried. What I was saying before about the narrative being all intertwined, the way she explained it all had me originally, because it was so intertwined, thinking she was saying they couldn't possibly have gone up in the woods because I would have heard them go through that gate. But I actually think she's basically saying they could not get onto the driveway. They could not have come off this area by the woodshed where they were allegedly playing and onto the driveway, because I would have heard them and I didn't hear them. And she's so determined to push that she did not hear them. But she's so very specific with I didn't hear them. I would have heard them because I would have heard Lily going, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie." And this whole hypothetical of, if they'd have gotten out into the driveway, I would have heard them, had progressed in the narrative to, if kids get out of a yard, they're going to get excited and they're going to run. And she explains that Jack and Lily do get excited when they run. Now, I've just realised that I have missed what is perhaps the most crucial clip, and I'm not sure why it's not queued up here. I must have accidentally deleted it when I was preparing this. So, yes, I do have one more clip to play, because this one is definitely important.
I come out of the tray, I heard the kids outside, and I opened up the door. Jack and Lily were right out here by the playhouse. If you look at the Google map, between the playhouse and the woodshed where the swings are, they were out there looking for worms and centipedes. Because when I opened up the door, Jack said, "Look, I found a worm, I found a centipede." I said, "Good boy." I said, "You keep looking." Then I went out, I started raking up the yard here for leveling out for a swimming pool for the kids, because I was going to put one up this year. Waiting for Daniel to help me build the fence, because he had to go look for his tools. Then after that, when Daniel came and helped me with put the 2x4s up, or the boards up on the fence, I continued with the fence. Then I came back in to get something to eat. I don't know what time the kids went inside or what time they went to bed or anything. And
I just want to remind you of the fact that Thursday evening shouldn't be hugely significant because the kids allegedly went missing Friday morning. But she's so detailed when she talks about Thursday, as opposed to Tuesday and Wednesday where she just brushes it off. You know, Tuesday the kids played in the yard, Wednesday the kids played in the yard. Thursday, let me give you a whole play-by-play of Thursday afternoon. And she goes through the usual part of she came outside, the kids were digging for worms, then she went and she raked the driveway, and then she introduces the fact that Daniel was also out there. He came out to help her with a fence. This is something we haven't heard before. And then she went inside to have supper. The kids were apparently still out there. And she doesn't know what time those kids went back in. And she doesn't know when they went to bed. Now, I wouldn't expect her to know what time they went to bed, unless she'd actually asked Daniel or Malaya the following morning. But it wouldn't be a question that you would consider to be overly important if you're being told that the kids got out of bed that morning, they'd been heard, and then they vanished. But what stands out to me is her saying, I don't know what time the kids went back inside. Because we know Janie is so sensitive to every little noise that goes on. She has said she hears everything that goes on that property from her trailer. She's also made it clear that when those kids are outside, they don't shut up, and that she can hear them the whole time yelling. But she does tone that down for the CBC interview. But essentially that's what she says multiple times in multiple ways. Now, someone who is so sensitive to noise, and clearly that is Janie to a T, would know the moment those kids went inside and you suddenly had that peace and quiet. I have a neighbour who goes out and starts their car at about 6:15 in the morning and leaves it running in the driveway for at least 20 minutes while they finish getting ready to go for work. And then they get in the car and they go at about 25 past 6. And I am awake the whole time. I'm a night owl. I'm not someone who gets up that early. And I am aware of the moment that car is started, and I am aware of the moment that car drives away, because the car is basically on their driveway, almost right next to my bedroom, because my driveway and their driveway are side by side. So it is only the distance of, or the width of my driveway away from my bedroom window. Now, I don't think I'm nearly as sensitive as Janie to noise. But my point there is, if these kids annoy the crap out of her so much with their noise, then she is going to be aware of their presence and them making noise the entire time that they are out there. Not only that, but we've heard that Jack was a bit of a handful. So I would imagine that someone would have had to have called those kids to come inside. I know when I was a kid, and I know things have changed now, but when I was a kid, we'd be out the back playing until someone stuck their head out the back and went, "It's dinner time," and then we'd come running. So apparently on the Thursday night, she didn't hear when everything suddenly went quiet because the kids had gone inside. She didn't hear someone calling the kids inside. So that sounds like out of this whole 2 years that those kids were living on that property, there have been 2 times when she didn't hear those children. One on the Friday morning, the alleged Friday morning, when they were outside playing and then suddenly everything went totally quiet. But also the Thursday night before, when they were outside playing. And apparently they must have just gone completely silent then as well. And nobody needed to call them in. They just went silent and calmly walked into the house like young adults. Something's not right here. Now, I pointed out these stones a few weeks ago. The pile of stones in the driveway, roughly in the location that Janie claims that she was breaking. Also, the location where Malaya was just randomly standing there. The location where the boot print was found. And there's a pile of stones that look like a can. Now, people have said to me that in terms of Canadian natives, cans are usually marker stones. Cans can have 2 purposes. They can be a marker stone, so they can be marking where the track is to go somewhere, or they can also be like a memorial. The moment I saw these stones, it bothered me a lot, because they have been put there intentionally. They have been piled up there intentionally for a reason. Now, we also have this photo of Daniel on the driveway from the day that the children went missing. And there's various scrapes in the gravel. But not only that, he is standing. Now, the caption, I should say first, for the particular article is that blue bit of pipe on the ground behind him is allegedly the location where the boot print was found. Now, Janie says this is also the location where she was raking and the location where Malaya was standing. Now, the first thing that I notice, after I notice the tyre tracks, and I'm going to come back to them, is that there is a bunch of rocks just dumped in one pile there on the driveway. Even though apparently Janie was raking it to level it out the night before. But there's a bunch of rocks right there, which would get in the way if you were trying to level it out for a pool. With that bunch of rocks dumped there to cover something up on the driveway, maybe a stain or something, I don't know. Because they are not there later on when Janie does that interview. But we do have that can behind her when she's doing that interview. But the biggest thing here is those deep tyre ruts in the driveway. They are massive tyre ruts. That's not just from someone being parked there and just casually driving away. And I'd like to know what the story is with them, especially given the location. And you can see that Janie certainly wasn't levelling it for a swimming pool there, because you've got a pile of rocks and you've got these big tyre ruts right there in the driveway. So I'm just going to try and pull it all together for you. We have Janie insisting that had they gotten out into the driveway, she would have heard them. And when she's saying that, she is basically pointing down the driveway, not up into the woods. She only turns and starts to point up into the woods after she's been saying that. Now, I'm wondering if she did hear those kids getting out into the driveway and she'd just gone inside to grab supper, so she ignored it. And then suddenly everything went silent and she heard Daniel yelling. The narrative and the timeline all intertwine between Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, and there are so many things that sound the same. But I keep going back to this insistence that had they got out into the driveway, she would have heard them. But then she's very specific with the, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie." So here's my speculation. Thursday evening. Now, Malaya claims these children went to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, well after dark. Janie claims that she was out in the driveway and the kids were digging for bugs and worms and stuff. And Daniel came out at one stage and he was helping her with the fence. She went inside and the kids were still outside. And she apparently never heard them go back in. Just like on the Friday morning, everything just went quiet. So my question is this. Did she, that Thursday evening, did she go into that RV and leave those kids out there? Maybe Daniel and Malaya just thought, well, okay, we'll just leave the kids there because Janie's out there on the driveway so she'll see what they're doing and maybe she'll send them in when she goes inside. I don't know. But maybe she was the only person out there on the Thursday night by the time she turned around and went in for dinner. Malaya said she was really tired on that Thursday night and claims that the kids slept in the clothes that they wore on the Thursday because she was too tired to unpack the clean laundry that she got from the day before, which to me sounded really odd in the first place because they had all that morning before they went out to do their shopping to unpack the clean laundry. And in terms of getting the kids into their pyjamas, well, you would only have to rifle through the laundry, find their pyjamas, and put them on. I mean, if they'd have been out digging in the mud or digging in the dirt for worms, you really would want to change their clothes before you put them in bed. Not Malaya, apparently. So let's go back to the driveway. So that Thursday night, was Malaya just not bothering because she was too tired? Who knows what Daniel was doing? Maybe he was still out there? And maybe he didn't realise what was going on. But from the way Janie is talking, I can't help thinking that she actually did hear those children running out into the driveway. And she heard Lily going, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie." But she didn't go out and check on them to see what they were doing because she was having her supper. And then suddenly, everything went silent. Not Friday morning, Thursday night in the dark on that driveway. I believe something happened then on that driveway. That would tie in with her claiming that she blames herself for not checking on them. It would also explain why she apparently never had any idea of what time they went inside on Thursday night, because she clearly didn't hear them, apparently. Didn't hear them being called inside. Were those kids running down that driveway and maybe someone was driving into that driveway and didn't see them? Were those kids running down that driveway and some other horrible accident occurred? She added into the narrative at one point, she changed the narrative a little bit. She said she heard the kids outside and her dog started barking, so she let her dog out into the yard. Well, maybe the gate wasn't shut properly for her yard. Did the dog chase those children? Did they run out onto the driveway and the dog ran after them and chased them and something happened? I don't actually believe, based on what Janie was saying, that these children could have been attacked by a dog, because it wouldn't have been sudden. She's describing a sudden incident, something that was instantaneous, which to me is suggestive of perhaps those kids being hit by a car. Why is everyone so evasive about Justin? Why is it such a big secret as to whether or not he was living on that property? Because Malaya told Belinda that he was living in the RV. And yet we can't get any solid confirmation of that from anyone in Daniel's family. Why was Justin crying that day that Belinda saw him crying? Because I doubt he'd be crying over his mother being upset. And why didn't Janie go on her date, or whatever it was, on the Thursday evening? She claims she hasn't got a car at the moment because there's something wrong with her car. Was someone else driving her car that evening and something happened? I doubt she'd let Daniel drive her car. She wouldn't let him drive the RV. But she spoke about going all around on that four-wheeler with Justin. Although I had heard some speculation somewhere about Daniel not being home on the Thursday evening. And I haven't actually found confirmation of that. But I had heard that speculation. Was Daniel out somewhere and he came home just at the wrong time? Why does Janie's dog react when she's talking about the kids being outside playing and her breaking the driveway? Why is that the part of the narrative that her dog responds to? To me, all these things that Janie has said seem to point towards something suddenly occurring in that driveway. And when you start putting it all together, when you listen to the way Janie talks, it honestly sounds to me that Thursday night, when she was done and she went inside, the kids were still outside, and she did hear them heading out onto that driveway. She did hear Lily yelling, "Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie." And then suddenly everything went silent. And maybe she does feel guilt for not going out and herding them back into the yard and telling them to get off the driveway. Because as grumpy and angry as she seems, and as much as she clearly dislikes Malaya and did not like the children, I would imagine that any person with just a little bit of humanity in them would feel bad if they had heard children getting out onto a driveway where they shouldn't be and ignored it, and then something happened. I truly believe that whatever happened to those children happened on that driveway. I truly believe that Janie knows about it. She knew that they got out through that gate. It's not just the reference to, had they got out the gate, I would have heard them. But it's also the, if two kids get out of the yard, they're going to get excited and they're going to run. So many specifics relating to that driveway. And this comment of, and then it just went completely silent. From listening to old Janie's audio, when I heard her make that reference to kids getting out into the driveway and getting excited and running, honestly, it felt like a gut punch. Because it honestly, to me, sounded like she was telling us what had happened. I think there's so much leakage in Janie's statements, and when you go through them and you start to draw all the threads together, I think she's telling us that something happened on the Thursday evening. She went inside. She finished raking the driveway and working on the fence. And she went inside to have supper and left those kids out there. And while they were out there, she heard them go in onto that driveway. But she ignored them because she was having supper. And then something happened. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. I may, another 3 weeks down the track, listen to some more audio and decide that there's actually something that points towards something else. But there is a heck of a lot when you go through all the things that Janie has said that make me look very closely at that driveway and look very closely at that Thursday evening. And when she talks about bring the kids back at night time because it's pitch black, it makes me think, were they outside and it was pitch black? And because it was pitch black, someone drove onto the driveway and didn't see them. Those children did not wander off into the woods. They were not abducted. They were not put in a car by Malaya and hidden away somewhere. Whatever happened to those children happened on that property. And the people who were on that property when that happened covered it up. Those people know what happened to those children. So on that note, I'm going to finish off there. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. I know I've pulled in a lot of threads into this. So you're probably sitting there and your head's probably spinning and you're still trying to pull it all together. I'm definitely open to hearing other ideas from people. This is just how I see it from listening to old Janie's audio. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm right. The majority of these conclusions come from statement analysis and, of course, a bit of basic psychology. But that said, there is no statement analyst in the world who gets it right every time. There is no psychologist in the world that can analyse someone's behaviour and get it right every time. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just putting forward my opinion. But I certainly will be keen to hear your thoughts on this. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button and please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been